Hi, everyone. Welcome to this evening's virtual open house, part of the Draper Community Engagement Series. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. My name is Megan Langell, and I'm an engagement strategist with public engagement for the Regional Municipality of Wood Buffalo, and I will be moderating this evening's virtual open house. Before we get started, I want to humbly acknowledge that the land on which we live, learn, work, and play is Treaty 8 territory. Welcome, we're just getting started. Thanks for being here. Before we get started, I want to humbly acknowledge that the land on which we live, learn, work, and play is Treaty 8 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree, Dene, and the unceded territory of the Métis. I would like to mention that this evening's event is being recorded and will be available on the Participate Wood Buffalo website in the coming days. So this past spring in April, we started the engagement series to create a space for ongoing and transparent conversations between residents and municipal staff about municipal projects and initiatives in the Draper community. We want to thank you for joining us this evening and want to express that the conversations will continue with residents in numerous ways. We do have an in-person engagement tomorrow, June 9th, which is at the Legion from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. and welcome you all to join us. It will be the same presentation and structure as tonight's engagement, but we're more than happy to have you there again tomorrow night. And then we also have additional engagements scheduled for later this month. Currently, we anticipate that the engineering department will be joining us to be sharing topics in regards to engineering. But once those details are confirmed, we'll be able to provide those to residents. The in-person is June 22nd at the Legion from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And there'll be another virtual engagement June 27th online from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And again, for registration and more information, you can find that all at participate.rmwb.ca/Draper. And I'm going to ask Shayla, who's supporting me in the back end tonight, to be able to just put that in the chat for anyone to be able to link to that easily. So tonight's discussion is targeted to the Draft Municipal Development Plan. We'll be presenting the feedback we received during our community visits and through the feedback form of what we heard. There have been numerous public engagement phases for the MDP throughout the years. Just as of recently, for the MDP engagement we had in fall 2020, we gained feedback on local values, priorities, opportunities, and visions from residents. In winter 2021, we gained feedback on the vision, goals, and directions. And just this past winter in 2022, we gained feedback on the draft plan. In April, we met with Draper residents, both virtually and in person, to get your feedback on the draft MDP. And during these sessions, it was requested that we provide additional questions specifically related to the Draper community and very targeted questions. From that request, the public engagement team conducted door-to-door community visits between May 16th and 20th, distributing these targeted questions to gain a better understanding of your perspective on the draft MDP. I do notice there's a couple of people joining us. Just want to welcome you all. We're just getting started and just doing some housekeeping items in regards to tonight's event. So between May 16th and 20th, the engagement team went out and conducted the door-to-door engagement. That was something that we heard loud and clear from Draper residents, that the door-to-door engagement was something that was really of interest for an engagement approach. We had conversations with those of you who were available at home at the time, and we dropped off MDP feedback packages to those who were not at home. Property owners who currently reside elsewhere were also contacted, either by email or mailed a copy of the feedback form. In total, 57 residents participated in the feedback form. The information from the feedback forms was collected and analyzed to clearly understand residents' feedback. This evening, we have a detailed presentation courtesy of the Planning and Development team to share the feedback forms, findings, and how that will reflected in the draft Municipal Development Plan. After the presentation, we'll open the floor to your questions. we recommend that any questions that you have throughout the presentation to provide them in the chat, and we'll circle back to them. So we're going to be going through the presentation and going through each question through its entirety, and then we will be taking question and answers, or going through the answers. So if you do have specific questions, I recommend putting it in the chat. That way it's top of mind and we can circle back for that. If you can, if it's available, when you're referencing the question in the chat, if you can reference the question number, if applicable, to help better respond to your question when we get to that portion. If you'd like to have a more private conversation with someone from our team, we can also support that after the Q&A for virtual breakout rooms within this platform, and please feel free to request that in this chat. And in the spirit of keeping the MDP moving forward, we ask that your questions tonight be related to the MDP, further engagement related to other municipal policies such as the LUB and ASP will be provided at another time at another engagement series session. Tonight's presentation and survey results will be made available tomorrow online at participate.rmwb.ca/Draper, which is already in the chat. Thank you, Shailesh. And before getting started on the MDP presentation, there are two Draper-related topics we'd like to inform you on now that we're with you this evening. I'd like to share a quick information about a construction notice affecting the Draper community regarding a traffic detour when entering the community. As you may have noticed, there's been construction for some time supporting Reach 11 flood mitigation, and starting June 15th, Draper Road will be detoured to Old Draper Road. This is to support the Reach 11 flood mitigation work that's being done in the area. And do keep in mind of signage. And for any more details, you can visit the website. I'll also ask Shailesh to put the direct link from the construction page for that construction notice. And do note that the temporary dog park and both boat launches, they will remain open throughout the detours. There will be access to those. And to receive emails on construction notices, you can sign up at rmwb.ca/subscription. That way you can get up-to-date information in regards to construction notices in your community. Secondly, I'd like to loop back to a question that was asked at the April engagement session regarding parks. There was a lot of questions in regards to does the municipality have any plans to be building a park in the Draper community? Is there a plan in regards to a community hall? We'd like to take a moment to connect back with you on that. We did connect with our parks department. The question was, are there any plans or opportunity for parks in Draper? So currently there's limited park infrastructure in Draper due to the lack of municipally owned lands in that area. Therefore, at this time, there are no plans for development of parks in the area. However, if there should be a change, the parks team is happy to revisit the opportunity for developing something for the Draper community. We hope that clarifies your question. It came up in both the in-person, and virtual sessions. So hopefully that clarifies things. And if you need further clarification, please feel free to follow up with us later in tonight's session or provide a comment in the chat. This is a community engagement. We really want to preface that. We are open to feedback regarding topics for future sessions. So again, we are open to hear your feedback on that. And we do invite you to share your email in the chat, or if you are more comfortable, you can send it to our participate email at participate@rmwb.ca. That way we can keep you informed and subscribe you to the website updates and the various engagement opportunities that will be upcoming. And then questions, if ever you have questions regarding Draper, there is a ask question online at the Participate with Buffalo page. So you're also able to ask your questions on there. And just a quick reminder again, that I know we have some people joining us a little late. We will be getting to our presentation momentarily. However, we will be going through the entirety of the presentation. So if you do have questions, please put them in the chat so that they're fresh of mind, and we will loop back with them in order once we get to the Q&A section, or you can wait once we open that up. We do encourage you to take yourself off mute, and you can ask your question over your microphone, or again, the chat is totally available as well. And before we get over to Such, I'm just going to prep Such that I'm going to be swinging over to him in a minute. I would like to acknowledge that the RMWB team members that are supporting this evening, we have numerous subject matter experts from the Planning and Development Department online. I've already spoken about Shayla Shbakwana, who's supporting in the back end, as well as Chris Booth is online tonight. And we have Manager of Public Engagement, Nadia Power, with us as well. So I'd like to introduce Such Chediok, who will be providing us the presentation, and I will leave that over to you, Such, to share your screen.
Thank you, Megan. Good evening, everyone. Like Megan said, my name is Such Chediok. I'm Supervisor in Planning and Development team here. I have a presentation for you. I'm just going to share my screen. Are you able to see it, Megan? I'm not able to see.
Yes, we can. Thank you,
Okay.
Such.
Thank you. So welcome, everyone. Like Megan said, we have some survey results from the survey that was conducted by our communications team and planning and development together, and would like to present those results along with the draft policies that we have for the Municipal Development Plan 2022. Okay, so the purpose of this presentation is to continue phase 3 engagement, which is extended from February until now. And to follow up with the previous engagement, we also want to discuss the survey results and present to you draft MDP policies. In total, we want to present to you some survey statistics before we actually get into the questions. We had a total number of 57 participants, 57 people who responded to the survey. The survey ran from May 16th to June 7th, which was yesterday. And we have received a numerous number of responses on different questions. Just to give you a high level statistics of the age distribution, we have gotten most of our responses from people between the age of 46 and 60, about 49.12%. And then we have received responses from people between the ages of 18 and 45, 31.58%, followed by people who are age 61 and above, 12.28%, and then people who are between 0 and 17, which is 7.02%. In the community of Draper, there are different zonings, land use zones. So the Draper Road divides the community into sort of two zones. The area on the river side is called SH, small holdings, and we've received 42.11% responses from that zone, people living in that zone. And on the hillside, we've received 52.63% responses. Also, in terms of addresses, because Draper Road is a road where most of the addresses are, we have received about 68.42% of our responses from people living on Draper Road, followed by Garden Lane, which is 15.79%, and then Riverbend Close, which is 10.53%. And then others are sites which do not necessarily have a civic address. They're not subdivided, they're still in their quarter section form. This is the total overall survey statistics. Now we can get into the survey results. Our first question, or question number 5 in the survey form, was, do you agree with the draft municipal development plan? On this question, everybody responded. So response rate is a representation of how many people off of 57 responded to this question. 100% of the people who took the survey responded to this question. 50.88% of the people agreed with the MDP. They said, the MDP as is good. 19.30% were not sure, they did not agree with the MDP, and 29.82 were unsure. As we go through the presentation, I think this presentation will provide a little bit more clarity onto, that surety aspect of the overall policies in the MDP. The next question was, should Draper maintain its rural character? Again, 100% of the people responded to it, so response rate was 100%, and 92.98% of the people said, yes, Draper should maintain its rural character. The associated draft policy in the current MDP, in the proposed MDP, is the municipality will require that development be compatible with rural character of Draper and conform to the local ASP. keeping in mind that 92.98% of the people still want rural character. We have kept it as is. We've not made any changes in accordance with this question. It still has the wording rural character in the draft policy. Next question was also a little bit related to the same policy, and that was the 2011 MDP considers Draper to be a residential community. Should the new MDP also identify Draper as a residential community to protect and preserve its residential character? Again, 100% of the people responded to this question. 85.96% of the people said they want Draper to be a residential community. So the policy that we talked about on the last slide, which was municipality will require the development be compatible with rural character of Draper and conform to the local ASP. We've added the word residential here because there's a lot of emphasis on sort of maintaining Draper as a residential community. So the new policy would look like this. The municipality will require that the development be compatible with the rural residential character of Draper and conform to the local ASP. Everything that's highlighted in the policy in green and written in green is what we've added to the policy. The next question was what uses other than residential should be considered for Draper? And the majority of the people have responded to it as no other uses, so none. 76.79% of people said we don't want any other use but residential. And 23.21% of the people said we want different kinds of uses, and those uses were commercial. 10 people said we want commercial. 1% said we want industrial. 2 people said we want institutional. 8 people said we want agricultural, and 11 people said recreational. And 43 people said no, we do not want any of the uses. The next question is also sort of connected to this, so we'll talk about policy on this slide. The next question was what uses other than residential should be subject to community input? On this question, about 95% of the people responded, and only 11% of the people, 11.88% of the people said no uses should be subject to community input. But the rest of the people here, you see a majority of them responding to this question some way or the other. Said were divided amongst different kind of uses. So 21.8% people said commercial should be subject to community engagement. Industrial should be subject to community engagement. Similarly, 16.25% said institutional, 15% said agricultural, and 17.50% said recreational uses should be subject to community engagement. Now, from these two questions, we see that there is a desire to have different kind of uses in Draper. There's, some people who want different kind of uses, but we also understand that people want it to be subject to community input. So there was no policy surrounding this question back in time. We've crafted a new policy, and that is to preserve the existing residential character of Draper. The municipality may, subject to community input, consider other compatible uses within the ASP and the land use bylaw. At this stage, because the percentage is very less, it's very difficult to sort of define what kind of uses could form part of Draper. Through this, at least we're sort of keeping the door open, for various uses subject to community input, and if the uses are compatible with the residential character of Draper. I'm going to go to the next question, which was, should new development in Draper be consistent with the existing pattern of large acreage lots? And 92.98% of the people said yes, we want large acreage lots or that style of development. There was no policy in the current draft. And we've again created a new policy, which is the municipality will require new developments to follow the existing large lot development pattern. Now, the policies that I'm presenting to you, the wording of these policies might change slightly depending on how we finalize them, but the intent of the policies will more or less stay the same in the final MDP. They might just stay as we're presenting them. There might be certain refinement to it, but in the final MDP, the intent will absolutely remain the same. The next question was, should the development of religious or institutional uses be considered in Draper? Again, 100% of the people responded to it, and 68.42% of the people said no. Development of religious institutional uses should not be considered in Draper. So there was a draft policy related to it, which was The municipality may also consider contextually sensitive institutional use for religious purposes in this area, and we have removed this policy. Now, that does not mean that any places, any sites that already have, religious assembly use added to them would not be allowed to do so. Any new users will have to go through some sort of public engagement. At this point, there is no policy in the current MDP, the draft MDP, that directly supports religious or institutional uses. But there will be a policy regarding other uses, which we just talked about a few slides back. I'll repeat it to you once again on this slide. The next question was, should the development of religious or institutional uses be subject to community input? And 71.43% of the people said, yes, it should be subject to community input. Keeping that in mind, we've sort of captured it in the policy that I presented to you a few slides back, which was to preserve the existing residential character of Draper. The municipality may, subject to community input, consider other compatible uses within the ASP and the land use bylaw. This again is a new policy that we're going to add to the draft MDP. The next question was regarding green buffer concept. And the question was, the draft MDP identifies a green buffer concept to protect the residential communities and environmentally sensitive lands. Should Draper have a green buffer to protect the community from incompatible uses such as industrial development outside of Draper? 82.46% people said yes to this question. And so there was already a policy in the draft MDP, which was the municipality will minimize the encroachment of residential development into non-compatible industrial development using a green belt of protected natural areas surrounding all residential neighborhoods. The only change we've done to this policy is to add some clarity, and we've added the words existing outside of Draper. Any industrial development outside of Draper will be sort of buffered out through this green belt. The new policy would read something like this. The municipality will minimize the encroachment of residential development into non-compatible industrial development existing outside of Draper using a green belt of protected natural areas surrounding all residential neighborhoods. The next question was, to preserve the heritage status, ecological and aesthetical value of and riparian areas of the rivers in the community, should the municipality consider preserving river shorelines through natural systems such as a green buffer? Now, we in the responses we got back, 78.95% of the people said yes to this question. But we also realized that it may not always be possible. And so the policy that was already there in the draft MDP, we've added the words where feasible, thereby sort of giving ourselves a little bit of flexibility in terms of achieving this idea. The new policies will read, where feasible, the municipality will investigate opportunities to protect riparian areas through development of linear parks and passive recreational spaces that contribute to the green network, helping to further connect the municipality's communities to its nature. And the next policy will be, where feasible, the municipality will work to establish green belts of protected natural areas surrounding all residential neighborhoods. Now, these policies are not specific to Draper. They apply to the region as it is, all of it. But I think it is a good idea to sort of build in that flexibility by using words where feasible. Next question was, should green buffer be considered for the development of walking trails, pathways, and other uses? So the green buffer around the rivers, should that be considered for walking trails and pathways? 59.65% of the people said no, it should not be considered for walking trails and pathways. So the draft policy that we have in the draft MDP, it read, the municipality will develop and implement policies through the land use bylaw to help conserve the ecological health and function of riparian areas and wetlands identified in section 5.1.1c. Policies should limit development that negatively impacts or impedes the natural function of ecosystems and instead promote their use as natural areas. It was parks and trails back in time. We've removed those words, and essential utility corridors that do not materially impact the function of floodways. So the idea of constructing or developing walking trails and pathways in that natural buffer is now gone. We will not have parks and trails, but we'll still have natural areas and maybe essential utility corridors in that area. Question number 16 was to protect the ecological health of wildlife and natural features. The draft MDP is focusing to establish a project that will identify and protect riparian areas in wood buffalo. Do you agree with this approach? 75.44% of the people said yes, they agree with this approach. And so the policy in the draft MDP will stay as is. We've not made any changes to it. The policy reads, the municipality will work with senior levels of government and conservation partners to secure funding for a project that will identify priority riparian areas and wetlands throughout wood buffalo. Emphasis will be placed on identifying areas that contribute most to managing flooding, reducing erosion, protecting water quality, contributing to natural beauty, and providing food and shelter for wildlife. This policy will stay as is. The next question was, the draft MDP proposes the following policy. Municipally and provincially identified high flood risk areas should not permit future development except when protected by appropriate structural mitigation measures. Do you agree with this policy? 100% of the people have responded to this policy, so all 57, and 82.46% of the people said yes to it. They agree to this approach. They agree to the policy. The draft policy in the current MDP, like I said, was municipally and provincially identified high-risk areas should not permit future development except when protected by appropriate structural flood mitigation measures. Will stay as is. We are not removing this policy based on the public feedback. Question 18 was, should the municipality consider other innovative floodproofing measures to promote safe development? Again, whosoever responded to this question, like 100% of the, we got 100% response rate on this question as well. And 50% of the people said yes to this policy. So again, a large number said yes to it. 40% of the people were unsure about it, but, keeping in mind that majority said yes, this policy will stay in the MDP, in the draft MDP. Again, the policy is municipality may consider the expansion of existing development or new development in high flood risk areas where innovative mitigation solutions are proposed. Next question was, to promote safe development, should the municipality prioritize the majority of growth in areas further away from flood hazard zones? 100% of the people responded to it. 73.68% of the people said yes to this policy. And so the policy stays as is. The policy was that all new growth must be focused in areas that are safest from flooding and other risks. Promoting safe new growth areas will help to invite new investment and build confidence for those wishing to develop in wood buffalo. No changes are being made to this policy as well. Question 20 was, our region has a long history of overland flooding with 17 notable floods since 1835. Slopes have also been an area of concern in the community of Draper. Should the municipality consider adopting reasonable measures to ensure any future developments are safe from natural hazards? 100% of the people responded to this question as well. 85.96% of the people said yes, municipality should consider adopting reasonable measures. So in terms of policy, it translates to country-style development may be allowed subject to technical studies and approvals for development by the municipalities in areas that are considered safe from flood, wildfire, slope instability, and slumping risk. No changes are being made to this policy as well. The next question was also tied to this, which was, which natural hazards are you most concerned about in your community? 39 people said wildfire, 45 people said flood, 28 people said slopes, 21 people said extreme weather conditions, and one person said other. Now you may see and say that 39, 45, 28, 21 do not add up to 57, but in this question there was an option to select multiple options, so someone could have selected wildfire and flood together, and that's why you see the numbers as they are. Again, they go back to the policy that is already there, which was country-style development may be allowed subject to technical studies and approval for development by the municipality in areas that are considered safe from flood, wildfire, slope, instability, and slumping risk. Nothing changes in here as well. The last question was, would the provision of a second access road to Draper enhance community safety? 50.88% of the people said yes to this policy, and the policies in the draft MDP as they stand right now, there no changes are proposed to those policies. I'll read these policies to you. The municipality will collaborate with provincial and federal governments to explore opportunities for developing alternate routes of transportation connectivity to all communities so that food supply chain continuity is preserved in the event of emergencies. Improvements in this area is critical in supporting food security to urban and rural communities. Where feasible, the municipality will work with the province to establish a minimum of two access routes in all communities and neighborhoods, and will also provide alternate evacuation routes for new urban neighborhoods. These routes can improve community connectivity to the rest of the municipality. Now, again, this is not a Draper specific policy, it's a general policy, but a lot of people have said yes to this policy as well. Overall, these are the policies that will form part of Draper's specific page in the MDP. I'll read all of these to you. The municipality will require that development be compatible with the rural residential character of Draper and conform to the local ASP. Second policy, to preserve the existing residential character of Draper, the municipality may, subject to community input, consider other compatible uses within the ASP and the land use bylaw. The municipality will require new developments to follow existing large lots development pattern. Fourth policy, country style development may be allowed subject to technical studies and approval for development by the municipality in areas that are considered safe for flood, wildfire, slope instability, and slumping risks. These are some policies related to natural areas. The municipality will minimize the encroachment of residential development into non-compatible industrial development existing outside of Draper using a green belt of protected natural areas surrounding all residential neighborhoods. The municipality will also seek opportunities to create a linear green belt of environmental protection along Clearwater River. With support from community, the municipality will identify ways to integrate this green belt into broader regional blue and green networks, and emphasis will be placed on protecting and preserving the natural environment. That, uh, in terms of next steps, we as the MDP team intend to finalize the MDP and take it to council sometime this year for a public hearing process. But after this, the discussions on the ASP and the land use bylaw will still continue. Based on the policies in the MDP that I've just presented, we will work through the ASP policies and the land use bylaw uses and regulations through more engagements with the community. That is all I have. Uh, Questions, Megan? You can open the floor. I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Sash. I'll just get you to mute. I have a little bit of an echo. Thank you. Just give you a second to catch your breath. Just before we get, I see Andrew has a comment or question already in the chat, but I wanted to see if you could just loop back to question 9. It's something that when we were going door to door to residents, it was a question that was talked a lot about in regards to the uses. So residential versus institutional versus commercial. Such, if you could maybe explain question 9 just a little bit further in regards to, if you could share your screen if possible and go back to question 9. You're on question 8. If you go to 9 in regards to the other uses, it has, yeah, so thank you. There you go. So that proposed change for the new policy, that's meaning that there's flexibility for opportunity for different uses in either a land use bylaw policy or ASP. Am I explaining that correctly?
So Megan, thank you. I'll give you a different, well, not a different interpretation, but how we conducted our analysis for this question. Now, question 8 and question 9 are related, and Andrew, you're correct on that. Question 8, where a lot of people said they don't want anything other than residential. It is connected to question 9 because in here, almost 95% of the people responded. And our interpretation of this question is that people want certain uses, but they want it subject to public community input or public engagement, and hence the policy. As it stands right now, there are uses allowed in the community of Draper. We're not saying only residential use would be allowed. We're just saying that if there are any other uses that the community wants to undertake, some sort of community input, be it through a public engagement or through by making that use a planning commission use or a discretionary use, would be required. So it's not to say that the community would only have residential use. A lot through this diagram here, you can see a lot of people have expressed interest in different kind of uses, but they want it to be subject to community input, hence the policy, which leads us to say that there is some flexibility, but it will be spelled out at the stage of ASP and land use bylaw.
Thanks, Sach. I know it's a lot of information, and just sometimes it's great to get a different perspective of responding to a question. So thank you for elaborating on that, because that's a big question we were asked from residents. So just good to note on. So I believe we elaborated on Andrew's question for my question, but if you could just maybe elaborate on Andrew's asking, why ask 8 if you're going to override it with question 9?
We're not going to override it with question 9. I think both of these questions present, in terms of analysis, they present a different idea. Question 8 says people want Draper to stay as a residential community. A lot of people don't want a lot of other uses other than residential. But when you analyze this question, we have almost a similar response rate, and only 11% of the people have said no, we don't want any other uses other than residential. That's our interpretation of this question. But other than, if we leave this 11% out, 88% of the people respondents have expressed interest in having some kind of other use, be it commercial or industrial or institutional, agricultural, recreational. People have not 100% said no, we don't want any other use. Yes, the interpretation, of this could also be of the previous question could also be that most of the people don't want any other use. But when you analyze this question with the previous question, they present a different scenario altogether. And so our interpretation of this is people do want some kind of uses. 88% of the people do want some kind of uses, but they want they want it subject to community input. So keeping that in mind, like I said, it's like no community would only have residential uses. There would be opportunities for other uses. We're not allowing it for sort of granted. It would always be subject to community engagement through this policy.
So would it make more sense such to say that it provides a future opportunity for those uses?
Yeah, I mean, in future, if those users come on board, they will have to be subject to public engagement and community input. Any of those uses, commercial, industrial, institutional, agricultural, recreational.
Okay, thank you, Sach. And I'm just getting another question here from Andrew. If there were other uses, should there be subject to community engagement? Not that we want non-residential. So I believe it's a two-part question, right? That if there's an opportunity for different uses in that community, that let's say, for example, that there be opportunity for commercial uses, that the residents of Draper can have community input of whether that will happen or not.
Absolutely, yes. So
okay.
Any other uses other than residential will have to go through some sort of a community engagement.
Okay, thank you. I hope that clarifies your questions, Andrew. If not, please continue to ask them in the chat. I'm going to go over to Jody. Jody, you've been patient. If you want to unmute yourself, please feel free to ask your question.
Hi, I just wanted to explain that when I answered this question, I looked at it as question 8, asked me if I wanted any other things other than residential, and I said no. And then when I looked at question 9, because I didn't know what the community feedback would be, my answer was I checked off every one of those things that I wanted community input for them in case my viewpoint wasn't agreed upon. So I wasn't saying I want commercial or I want industrial or I want agriculture or I want any of those other matters. But if the community wanted those things, which according to question 8, they clearly didn't, I then was saying, if you're going to have them, then we definitely want community input, not that it was a permitted use. So I'm not sure that you can actually analyze the data the way that you have unless you ask a question that is more clear to the community. I don't know what other people thought, but I can definitely tell you that I answered on my survey that yes, I would want community input for commercial, industrial, institutional, agriculture, and recreational, and that I would have said um, would be subject to community input. I wouldn't have said none because I wanted all those other things to be subject to community input. And that's why I think when you look at question 8, you have such a strong response to nothing except residential. And then you have this mismatched response under question 9. That would be my interpretation. And that may not be your interpretation, but I think the only real way to determine what was actually meant by the survey takers is to ask the question in a clearer manner, because that was not clear to me when I took this survey. That's what you were trying to get at. I definitely don't want any of those things. I just said, if the community decides yes, then I definitely want input on that. Community input before we decide.
Yeah, if I may, Megan, thank you, Jody, for that comment. Number one, in question 9, we did not provide people with the standard land uses that you see on screen: commercial, industrial, institutional. People gave us their ideas about what they wanted community engagement on. So people wrote things like, if there was a bed and breakfast, we want community engagement on it, or if there was a commercial park, we want a campground, we want community engagement on that. So we have taken those uses and broken them down into these 5 or 6 standard land use categories, and that's how we sort of get these different variations of uses. But all it shows us is that the community is sort of divided in terms of the kind of uses that they want community engagement on. One thing that's very clear is anything that happens in the community should be subject to community engagement. As it is, by crafting this policy, we're not saying that you can have any uses for granted. Any uses will have to be subject to community engagement, community input, and if the community does not want that use in that community, it will probably not go through. So as by crafting this policy as it is, it's not a guaranteed sort of approval of any of these uses. Yes, it sort of keeps the door open, but in a document that spans over 20 years, I'm not sure if you want to sort of shut down all the doors in terms of development for a particular community. Yes, through this policy, there is some flexibility built in there to have other compatible uses that are, compatible uses here that are compatible with the already existing uses in the community of Draper with some community input. That's what this policy is. I'm not sure if I'm able to convey what I wanted to, but the overall idea is by crafting this policy and by putting it into the MDP, it does not guarantee any of these uses would form part of ASP or land use bylaw, or would sort of get implemented on ground. Anybody who wants any of these uses will have to go through some kind of community engagement, which will be further defined in the ASP and the land use bylaw. At this point, we're just saying, through this policy, we're just saying, any of the uses should be, number one, they should preserve the character of the community of Draper, which is a residential community. Number 2, they will have to be subject to community input. Number 3, they'll have to be compatible to what's already existing in the community of Draper, and they'll be defined in the ASP and the land use bylaw. So by no means is it sort of opening the door to all kinds of commercial, industrial, institutional development in the community. It's just saying, you know, we recognize that there's a desire to have different kind of uses from these 88% of the responses that we've gotten, but any of these uses would be subject to a community input exercise. They have to meet this criteria before they get implemented on ground. Okay.
Does that provide clear definition, Jody, on those two questions? Sorry, you're muted still, but just wanted to
Thank
clarify.
you. Yes.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. I can speak to in regards to we had several survey submissions or feedback forms, excuse me, when we were doing the door-to-door, and it was very clear that we were in question 8 asking, you know, if there were any other uses other than residential, what would they be? And again, it was open-ended question, so people had to specifically say those items. And then we went to the next question that, you know, totally separate, and stating, you know, if there was opportunity or if in the future there are different uses that are going to be available for those that community, would you want community input? And obviously you can see that a lot of people wanted to have that input. So consensus, because I know I think Andrew, we're on the right track of trying to define the difference between 8 and 9. And I see Dale, I hope it's Dale, who I met with a lovely dog, and Draper agreed. So just to get consensus from everyone, it's understood that the residents that are on the call right now, that, you know, the consensus is that residential uses is primarily what people want only, and that if in the future there's opportunity for different uses, that majority of those different uses should have community input. Just to get a consent, you can say yes, yay, nay in the chat, but this is kind of the time to really provide us that feedback so that we can get clarification, because those are good questions, Andrew and Jody. So feel free to put in the chat if that's your consensus, that question 8, that, you know, you're wanting just residential uses to be available for the Draper community. And then question 9, meaning that if there is opportunity for different uses to be used, that the residents have an input about that. Jody, go ahead.
I apologize. I don't have chat. So I'm actually saying that if those things are going into either the area structure plan or the land use bylaw, that I'm requesting that it be the majority of the Draper residents agreeing to those things going in. What we don't want is to continue to have our community divided because a planner decides that it's not a nuisance when 80% of our community or 75% of our community believes it is. This has gone on for over 10 years, this dispute back and forth about whether or not commercial can be here. And there won't be any peace until this issue is decided. And if it's a majority decision, then what I'm asking for is that it be determined in the area structure plan, the land use bylaw, and the MDP, if at all possible, through this public engagement instead of going before an SDAB each time and each different planner. If it's set out in the legislation, clearly set out by majority of the residents, then I think it can be dealt with rather than what's going on and has been going on in our community for over 10 years.
Thank you, Jody. Go ahead, Sach.
Thank you, Megan. To respond to Jody's question, Jody, we do not intend to, you know, take the path of going to SDAB over and over and over again for any kind of uses. The idea to spell it out in the MDP that it'll be sorted out. I shouldn't use the word sorted out. It'll be defined in the ASPN land use bylaw is to sort of identify any uses that would be sort of allowed or not allowed or discretionary allowed or allowed in a planning commission form. All of those things will be defined at the stage of ASP and land use bylaws. What we are saying, we're not saying that nothing would be allowed. We're also not saying that everything would be allowed. All we're saying is, number one, if anything is going to be allowed, it will be subject to community engagement. Number two, we're saying that these things, all of these uses, if there is anything that goes in the community, will be defined in the ASP policies, which will then inform the land use bylaw uses and will form part of the legislation itself. We do not intend to go to the path of SDAB over and over again. Yes, if there are uses in the land use bylaw, the community decides that they want certain use in the land use bylaw, which again will have engagements for. We will, and if they are in the land use bylaw, it becomes a right of any citizen to sort of appeal that use if the decision of the municipality, basically. But for now, all we're saying is the ASP and the land use bylaw will define which uses will be subject to community input. And once we get to the engagement sessions for ASP and land use bylaw, we'll probably have better clarity on it. Because the MDP is such a high level document, it cannot really define which uses or land use bylaw, which uses or specific permitted or discretionary uses will form part of the community. At this level, at the policy level, we can just say it at a very, very high level, and that's what we've done.
Thanks, Sach. And thanks, Jody. I see some more frustration in regards to that item in the chat, just in regards to the, the long time that these policies have been going back and forth with engagement. So very much noted. We understand that it's frustrating. It's been years in the making. So we're definitely wanting to continue to engage. Like Sach had said, that's going to be further discussions about that particular item with ASP and LUB. But definitely we note the community's frustration in regards to the long time of engagement and getting these policies updated. I did want to go back to HEMD. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I know that you had made a comment in the chat in regards to, again, the community engagement and not, having a long time of having to have those community engagements. So definitely noted. That's something, a sentiment that we felt and heard throughout the door-to-door engagement sessions, and definitely thank you to those that we were able to meet in person. Everyone was certainly welcoming, but that was something that we heard loud and clear from residents that the long time coming for getting these policies updated. So definitely note that. And Andrew, just to loop back in regards to the 8-9, definitely don't want to make you feel tricked in regards to answering those comments. So I'm glad we could clarify in sessions like this in regards to what residents meant for their feedback for those two questions. So I think there's understanding such that we understand the consensus for 9 for the residential uses. Yes, let's do it. Others, not in favor for right now. However, if that were ever to come up again, that the residents have input of what those uses would be put forward. Am I making sense, Sach?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, Megan.
Okay. I just want to go, I'm just checking the chat again. Dale, thank you. Just made a comment, I don't want different uses, but if they are forced on me, then I want to say thank you. We need that feedback. Just give me 1 second. I'm just reading. Andrew made a long comment, and I'm just trying to highlight it so I can read it on my side. Just give me a quick moment. And just to remind everyone, if you do have further questions for Sach in regards to the survey results and the recommended changes, please feel free to put them in the chat. And as I read these,
some people's chats aren't working. I know they won't give me an access to chat at all, and I think I'm not the only one.
Okay, Dino, are you able to raise your hand?
I can raise my hand, yes.
Do you have any comments for us?
I've had a few, but I guess I've been just biting my tongue here, so they've kind of been answered, so I'll just sit back. But just to let you know that there would be more chats, I think, if it was available to all. I'm not sure why it's not available on my phone.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. I know sometimes mobile can be a little difficult, but not to put you on the spot, but is there anything that we haven't responded to?
No, it's been responded to. The industrial commercial thing just kind of blew my mind. I think it's been pretty cut and dried, and it's not wanted down there. And to see it, and I understand it's going to be put out for public engagement or whatever, but once again, I mean, we've done that already, and it seems like it's just we're kicking a dead horse here. But anyways, it's not for me.
No, but just from your perspective, the commercial and industrial is something that you wouldn't be in favor for the Draper community.
Not at all. No, I don't.
Okay.
Nobody would want that beside them.
Thanks, Dino. Thanks for confirming. Chris, I see your hand is up. Feel free to interject.
Thanks, Megan. In light of all of the concerns that are being raised here tonight, which I think are really good ones on this question, and I would agree that this is certainly one of the key issues that I know I have personally also seen the community grappling with over the course of many years and the development of the area structure plan as well. So I suppose I'm also motivated to be able to try to get some resolution to this issue here as well in the MDP. And I suppose what I'm really trying to do is be able to really crystallize what the issue is, and if we can try to get some consensus on it here as to the approach, that would be, I think it would be preferable, it'd be beneficial. So my read on it is, if I had to sort of put my thumb on it, it's if there is a desire, sorry, let me rephrase that. The desire of the community, or at least the residents on this call, and certainly the survey results, the 43 individuals that responded to that question seem to clearly have a preference for residential as being the focus of the community, and we've seen that reflected in the first few questions as well, where it was intended to be a primarily residential, rural residential community. So where my brain is going with that is, if that's the intention, then anything other than residential, and perhaps this is where this particular question was going, albeit maybe not as effectively as it could have, is anything other than that. If we go anywhere other than residential, then that's something that we would need to get community input on. And where my brain immediately tends to go there is in the zoning, the country residential, the small holding zoning, where we have permitted uses. Those are the ones that are going to be, not particularly impactful. That's where you'll find a lot more of the residential based uses in there. Single detached dwelling, manufactured or modular home, those are residential uses. But then any of the discretionary ones, that's where we might say, you know what, if you want to do any of these discretionary uses, or some of the ones that don't have, particularly clear rules or guidelines around them, then those are the ones that we ought to get some engagement on before we start to render decisions as the development authority. Because right now there's no hard and fast requirement that we conduct public engagement on discretionary uses, but responsibly speaking, we ought to, especially if we know that there is concern in the community about those uses. So that's perhaps sort of the line of thought or the question I might put on the table for consideration. Maybe it helps this particular question. And then anything that's obviously not listed in the zone, that would absolutely require an amendment to the bylaw, which in itself would require public engagement and, of course, a public hearing at council, and that's just a given. But if there were uses in the discretionary categories, and I think I heard such mention bed and breakfast. That's a bit of a more of a commercialized use. Campgrounds, country inns, resort facilities, those are leaning a bit towards the commercial side of things. So those are activities that I would suggest if a policy were to make its way into the MDP, and I appreciate that Such and his team have taken a crack at it, that those are the ones that we would request public engagement on as part of any development permit application. So I wanted to put that out there just for consideration, because I know that we need to bring some conclusion or some resolution to this, and I feel like I really need to sort of solicit that conversation or get that conversation going. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Such.
Thank you, Megan. Just to add to Chris's comment, thank you, Chris, for that clarification. Just to add to Chris's comments, if we, only perceive Draper to be a residential community and do not allow anything else, there are other uses that ought to be part of residential communities, such as a recreational use like a public park. If we restrict it only to residential uses like public park, home occupation, or a home business that are essential to a sort of survival of a residential community itself, also are out of the question. So that's why we say, we're not saying that other uses would be allowed for granted, but there are other uses that a residential community itself should have. And those uses would have to go to some sort of a community engagement if they were to be allowed in the community. If we just shut the doors on the community in terms of just residential uses, then all of these uses also would sort of go out, which are sort of essential to a good planned community. I'll leave it at that, and I think Chris has sort of explained it a little bit more than I have. But for the community, I'd just say, when you're responding or when you're perceiving this question as to be, allowance of other industrial or commercial activities in the community, it's not about that. It's about uses that absolutely, in good planning terms, should form part of a residential community, such as recreational areas, such as a dog park or a public park. Things like that also form part of a residential community. It's not about commercial or industrial uses. It's about those uses as well. So when we shut the doors down on any uses other than residential, all of these uses also tend to just go out the door. I'll just leave you with that thought. Megan?
Thanks so much, Such. I'm gonna loop Chris back if I can, just really quickly. And before I do want to note, I know Dino had let us know that there's some issues with the chat if you're joining us by mobile. So if you do have a question, comment, want to speak to us, please feel free to do the raise hand button so that we can get your questions answered. So please feel free, if you don't have access to the chat, definitely raise your hand and we can get to you. Chris, just reading through, thanks Andrew for the comments in the chat. I was just sifting through it. Again, we definitely feel the frustration. I don't think there's anything that we can say to explain the magnitude of years that this has gone through, but to preface that we're here and we're excited and wanting to engage with you and complete this updated MDP, and then to go into LUB and ASP. It's a priority. We're working towards it. But Chris, if you could maybe just very high level speak to the public hearing for land use bylaw, because I know Andrew had mentioned it in the comments in regards to the motion. There was a motion put forward from administration for more engagement to happen for the Draper community specifically. We don't yet have details on that, but just a little bit of background Chris a high level of, what had gone on with that public hearing and that we intend to engage again, that we just don't have details on that yet.
Certainly, Megan, I'm happy to. The public hearing that happened on late April, the exact date is escaping me. I want to say the 27th of April of last year. We did bring forward the bylaw, the draft proposed new land use bylaw, and after hearing from some concerned citizens in Draper, the decision was made to basically sort of direct administration to go back and re-engage on those very specific issues. And this that we're sort of trying to preliminarily tackle here tonight is one of them. This aspect, or this ongoing concern about commercial uses versus residential uses is one of those items that required some resolution, and that was one of the items that we needed to tackle before we brought back a new land use bylaw. So in order to tackle that, we need the direction in the municipal development plan first to lay that broad framework for, is this a residential community, or is this a residential community with lots of other opportunity in it? And I think the survey questions that we have here, particularly the first couple of them, seem to really make it clear that the intention is for it to be residential. So if we were to then fast forward to land use bylaw engagement sessions, we would really start to flesh out what are those specific uses that comprise residential that would be allowed, and what are the other uses that would be allowed. And I do have the draft here as well, and my understanding is that there's quite a bit of similarity between the proposed draft and the existing zoning that we have there today. There's not a lot of new stuff that's being added in there. It's fairly status quo, if memory serves. So in my view, if we're able to get this really nailed down here, that what we're talking about is a residential community, it helps us when we get to that LUB stage to say, you know what, this is already a settled issue. We've already determined that this is a residential community. If there's any other uses that could be even remotely commercial in nature, then those ought to be A, discretionary uses, or B, not in the zoning entirely and only subject to consideration through an amendment. That would quite honestly be the direction that I might take as a planner, taking direction from the MDP. I've gone on quite a bit there, Megan. I hope that helps.
That's great. I just wanted reiteration in regards to, we're focusing on the draft MDP, and then we'll be able to, really elaborate about LUB and ASP, that there's kind of a step process. So thank you for that. I'm going to read out a question in the chat to support those of you that can't see the chat. So this is going to go back over to you. There's a question in regards to, can you comment on the current existing approved uses that have been constructed in Draper? What existing approved permits exist with built structures already constructed for Draper? For example, there are residential homes with permits, a church with a permit for an approved use. Is there currently anything else? So I know we kind of spoke a little bit that at the beginning in regards to the uses, but if you could elaborate to that.
Thank you, Megan, for that question. I don't have a list of all the approved uses in Draper right now. What I do know is there are primarily residential uses in the community. That's what we are contemplating the community to be as well. Even in this section here, we're saying it is going to be a rural residential character community. but I'm sorry, I don't have a list of all the approved permits in Draper at my hand right now. I know, like I said, I know primarily they're residential uses. And other than that, I don't have that information at this point.
Thanks, Sach. Jim, if you wanted to provide your contact information and have further questions in regards to that, please feel free to put that in the chat. Or if you want to elaborate on that, of anything further that Sach could support with, just let us know. Just commenting, Andrew made a comment in the chat. Home-based businesses I have no problem with, as it's inherent to residential or compatible, but commercial or institutional businesses or anything that draws non-residentials to the areas, no thanks. Again, Andrew, it's something that we heard quite a bit when speaking with residents door to door, as well as the results of the feedback form that you know, a lot of people had said none. So thank you again for reiterating that. Jody, I see your hand up.
Make a suggestion for the change. So to preserve the existing residential character of Draper, you might want to change it to say that the municipality, prior to considering any other compatible uses within the ASP and the land use bylaws, the municipality must engage in community input. Because I think that's what you're trying to say, is that the majority of people down here have said we only want residential. That's what question 8, the survey shows. So what this would say is we're not excluding other compatible uses compatible to existing residential character, but the municipality must engage in community input prior to implementing any of those, whether through the ASP or the land use bylaw. And that way, I think that those of us who have been struggling to maintain and protect the residential character, because the other way that you're saying it, it just says they may, subject to community input, consider other compatible uses, but there's no obligation to have community input. It's not mandatory language, whereas if you say they must engage and obtain community input, and the majority of community agreeing before it goes ahead, not just community input and then saying, well, there's 30% of the people that want it, let's go with it. So I would just ask that that be considered in the final draft of the MDP.
Thanks, Jody. Sach?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Megan. Jody, I can confirm that the intention of this policy, like I said, is what you've confirmed as well. To me, when I read this policy, it says municipality may consider other compatible uses subject to community input. So that category of municipality must do a community engagement is already sort of built in there. Like I said, the language can be refined as is, but the idea absolutely is that any other uses other than, you know, residential, even if it be a community hall, that we've heard from community that they want a community hall there. That also would be subject to community inputs, community engagement of some sorts. So nothing other than residential is forming part of the community without community input is what we're intending to say. And now, if the language around, you know, using the word must helps clarify it, I don't think we would have any objections to it. As it is, like I said, the intention of the statement is that the municipality may consider the uses subject to community input. So that the component of must have community engagement or must be subject to community input is already sort of built in this statement here. But we are open to that suggestion as well. I mean, like you said, we can consider that.
Chris, go ahead. You have your hand as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan, and thank you, Sach, and thank you, Jody. I think that certainly reflected what I was trying in a very sort of long-winded way to describe. The only item I might suggest is the municipality may not necessarily be the group to conduct that engagement. If it's a development permit application that comes in from a private applicant, then we will put the onus on that individual to conduct the engagement. But to your point, we would require the engagement to occur. So I think we'll work on our end to make sure that we fine tune that language to properly consider that. Thank you. I appreciate, Jody, your efforts to craft some language on the fly.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Jody. Just going back to Jim's question and such in regards to different permitting approved in that area. Is there an opportunity such for approved uses to share that we could gain in the next few days and place on the Draper page for Jim's question in regards to that?
Megan, we can look into it. We don't have a ready list of all the approved permits in the area. We don't maintain a list like that for any of these areas. We'll have to look through the property files, but yes, something like that, a list like that can be created, and we can share, some of that stuff onto the Draper webpage. At this point, I cannot say how many residential permits have been approved or otherwise, but we can absolutely take it back and come back with an answer on this question.
Thanks, Such. And Jim also was gracious enough to provide me his email information. So we can contact you that way as well, Jim. And we can also provide it on the Participate with Buffalo page. And being transparent, we can also have it on there. So thanks, Such. We'll do that in the next few days. I did want to remind everyone, we're just at 7:17. We did schedule 3 hours for tonight's session. So again, we really want to gain your feedback and be able to answer any of your questions in regards to how these adjustments will relate to the Draper community for the draft MDP. So if you do have questions and you're not able to ask them in the chat, please feel free to raise your hand. We're more than happy to answer the questions that you may have. And just another comment in the chat, Andrew stated after reviewing the documentation you have up, I noted the words compatible uses is included in the amendment, which makes a big difference to me. Thanks so much, Andrew. Again, everyone, if you have any questions in regards to the survey results or how the changes will be implemented into the draft, please feel free to raise your hand or ask your question in the chat. And Such, if you can, if you could just go back to I think it's your second last slide, that just goes over again the next steps once we gain all this, once we gained all the information of the feedback, what's kind of the next steps for the MDP, just to reiterate it.
Absolutely, Megan. Thank you. Like I mentioned before, the next steps for us would be to finalize the policies in the MDP and present them to council. But the discussion around the area structure plan, what kind of policies go in the area structure plan, again, details of what kind of activities or what kind of uses would be subject to public engagement, any policies surrounding that, and any uses that go in the land use bylaw zoning information. We will continue discussions on both of those items, but before going to an area structure plan policy, we need to set the high-level overarching idea of what Draper is going to look like, and that's what we were trying to do through this engagement. So once the MDP process is finalized, we will continue discussions on the area structure plan and the land use bylaw. We intend to take the MDP to council in 2022 itself. We were originally hoping to do it early this year, but we've been busy with a lot of engagements so far. And we want to ensure everyone's sort of comments gets incorporated in the document. So the idea still is to go to council sometime this year with the final document, but continue discussions on the ASP and the land use bylaw in times to come.
Thanks such for reiterating that. Jim asked a question in regards to what language is used in the Sapper Creek draft to ensure similar residential large lot development. I believe, Jim, you're referencing that area within the draft MDP, but wanting to just gain clarification, but such I would believe that's what he's speaking of.
I'm not exactly sure on what the question is, Megan. What I can say through this is that the draft MDP is available online, and I think Jim is talking about how development will happen in Sapper Creek. If that's the question, then the policies for Sapper Creek itself are contemplated in the draft MDP, the link to which we can share in the chat itself here. Jim, if you have specific questions about Sapper Creek, please feel free to connect with me. I'll leave my email address in the chat here, and we can talk about it.
Thanks, Such. I believe that's also what he's meaning, but we'll get some clarification. And I think Shilas is going to beat me to putting it in the chat, the draft MDP. Just going to Matt provided some comments, and again I just want to read it out for awareness of those that are joining us via phone tonight. He's saying preserve residential character of Sapper Creek. Sapper Creek is a residential community. I don't know, I believe you're maybe copying and pasting as I'm reading this out from the actual MDP draft. Thank you. Okay. Matt did our work for us. So Matt just inserted, Jim, that direct language that's in the draft MDP for that. So if you needed further clarification, Jim, if that's not what you meant, just let us know and we can clarify. But thank you, Matt, for putting that within the chat for everyone. Okay, Jim just clarified that's exactly what he meant. And then also, don't know why, but the link is not working. So I'm going to also put a link, excuse me, looking away while I'm multitasking. I'm going to put a link in the chat as well. Jim, that's the direct link to the draft that you can look into that section of it in a little bit more detailed. And then Jim's just asking, with less infrastructure in place with Sapri, I would question why alternate development would even be considered. Such, is that something you want to speak to?
I'm sorry, Megan, I'm not clear on the question. I'll have to look at the policy that Jim is. I understand the question, but I don't want to give out an incomplete set of information. That's why I'm saying, Jim, the question that you have, please connect with me and I'll help you through it. We can go over the policies if you want, and I can answer any of your questions. At this point, I'm not 100% clear as to what exactly are you asking, and so I don't want to give you a wrong answer through this conversation.
Thanks,
Chris?
Such.
I can maybe take a run at it, Such. I don't want to put words in Jim's mouth. I think maybe it might be going back to the conversation we were just having around the pie chart that showed, you know, commercial and industrial and institutional, and perhaps Jim is asking why we would even consider those kinds of uses if we're talking about a community that that doesn't even have the same service levels as other hamlets within the municipality. I hope I've gotten that right, Jim. And my response to that would be similar to what I've mentioned as well earlier here, that I don't think the intention is to open things wide up to start incorporating all sorts of additional commercial and industrial uses. Really, the intention here is to stick with the zoning that was put forward for consideration last year at council, and I think the discussions that we're having here and the survey results that we've gotten here over the last couple of weeks really reinforce why that proposed zoning was written the way it was written, and I would see no reason to really break from that course. Based on the survey results here. So I don't think there's really any consideration being made. And if there was a consideration to start adding significantly sized commercial or dare I say it, industrial uses, then that would have to be done through an amendment to the land use bylaw, which would require a series of supporting studies, as well as not only public engagement, but public hearings before council as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. And as you were talking, Jim just confirmed that was correct. Our guesses were accurate. So if you need any further clarification, Jim, just let us know. So I'm going to get things, you're going to start wrapping up. Again, if you do have questions, feel free to hang out after most people depart, or provide your questions again in the chat or raise your hand. I did want to, prior to going to our conclusion, I just wanted to go back. I wasn't able to get to it, and my apologies. Andrew had put in a lengthier comment questions in the chat. So again, just to support those that are joining us tonight via audio and their phone, I'm just going to read out the comment that was made by Andrew. Thank you, Such, but by adding the statement about other uses in Draper, you are opening up the land use bylaw to other uses, despite 86% telling you we did not want to. After seeing the survey results, I'm prompt to make a few comments about the overall process. Despite over 10 years of public engagement with the residents of Draper, last year a few individuals spoke at a council meeting and claimed that there had been no public engagements in relation to the new land use bylaw. This was a misrepresentation of the facts. Similar comments were later made about the MDP engagements. In fact, these public engagements had been well publicized and attended for years by Draper residents. But these individuals either did not have the results or were new residents to the area and were unable to comprehend that this place existed before they got here. Draper residents have been involved in public engagement since 1998, when it was decided to make this a residential community, an area that experiences major flooding and no infrastructure, as it was achievable and realistic use. But it came as a significant cost to those who valued their quiet country residential acreage living. Construction and maintenance costs are higher in Draper, but these costs were accepted because we wanted the quiet country living that we could not get in urban Fort McMurray. But there was an additional unintended cost of living here that was reduced our benefit. The constant public discussion has led to nothing but anger and hurt feelings for members of the community. Over the years, Draper residents have all gotten to know each other's opinions on the subject, as we have all had to voice these opinions time and time again publicly. We also have done many surveys that had similar results. These appear to be a small group of residents who either have purchased properties during or after 2019 and appear to regret their decision, or are part of a small group of long-term residents who don't like the results of the public engagement, who still hold out hope that their properties are worth millions of dollars regardless of the lack of infrastructure, and even after the flood of 2020, which flooded Draper with 18 feet of water. The community controversy should have been resolved in 2010 when the final draft of the Draper Area Structure Plan was produced and ready for council. I certainly hope that those who are unhappy with these latest survey results are now able to accept the results so that the rest of us can put this behind us. The majority of residents did not ask for this latest survey. A small group of disgruntled property owners did. We expected these results to mirror the results of 2019, and they did. It's time to respect the majority and to respect your neighbors. Thank you, Andrew. And that comment came from the conversation about talking about land use bylaw that I asked Chris to just verify, and the process that we're going through that. So Andrew just made a comment saying you should look into doing audiobooks professionally. I don't know about that, but definitely, again, we hear your frustration. You know, we can't speak in regards to the past, but we're definitely here and we're excited to be here and hoping that we can move this forward, go through MDP, update that policy, and then go further into LUB and ASP. So thank you again for your patience. So with that, I'm going to say it concludes tonight's discussion. Thank you for commitment to the community and joining us this evening. Please do encourage your friends and neighbors who weren't able to participate tonight that there's another opportunity tomorrow, June 9th. Yes, tomorrow from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the Legion. There are going to be additional engagements upcoming June 22nd and June 27th. Again, those details can be found on participate.rmwb.ca/Draper. You can pre-register and have find more information on that website. Also, to reiterate, tonight's presentation and survey results will be made available tomorrow at the participate.rmwb.ca/Draper. And again, on behalf of everyone from the Regional Municipality of Buffalo, we thank you for participating tonight and hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.